Hi, this is Jack from Jack's English, and we're back again today to look at Sherlock. Today we're going to look at episode 1, the first of the whole series. So Sherlock and Watson are going to meet for the first time, and actually they're going to discuss getting a flat together. Flat is the British word for apartment. So we're going to learn 3 things again, as usual. So let's get into today's class. We've got a slightly longer clip than usual today. And as I said, we're going to learn 3 things in this class. Watch the following clip and listen carefully to what Sherlock says.
Got my eye on a nice little place in central London. Together we ought to be able to afford it. We'll meet there tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. Sorry, got a dash. I think I left my riding crop in the mortuary.
So did you catch that? Our first expression today is where Sherlock started that scene and says, I've got my eye on a nice little place in central London. Now, we're looking specifically at I've got my eye on something. This is a very common expression meaning I admire something and I want to have it. So in this case, Sherlock says, I've got my eye on a nice little place in central London. It means he's seen something, he admires it, and he'd like to have that, or he'd like to move into that house. Now, my real example is I've seen an iPad on the internet. I'd really like to have it, especially for my teaching. So I can say nowadays, I've got my eye on a new iPad. I'd love to have that and use it. Our next expression today is where Sherlock says we ought to be able to afford it.
Together we ought to be able to afford it.
Referring to the flat. We ought to be able to afford it. Now, ought to is a very common modal verb, especially in British English. Now, it has a few different meanings, but today we're going to focus on probability. And it's used in the same way as should, which you might be more familiar with. So, in this case, we ought to be able to afford it means we should be able to afford it, or it's probable we'll be able to afford it. Not definite, but probable. Now, for me, I could say, referring to the end of my work, I could say, I ought to be home by 6 p.m. That simply means it's probable I will arrive by 6 p.m. And I could say the same with, I should be home by 6 p.m. So exactly the same use as should, and it means that something is probable. The last thing I want to look at with you today is in the last section of that clip, where Sherlock Holmes says, sorry, got a dash. So let's just remember what he said and look at the clip one more time.
Sorry, got a dash. I think I left my riding crop in the mortuary.
So there's a few things I want to discuss here. Firstly, pronunciation. Now, as you heard, Sherlock says, got a dash. Got a dash. It's almost like a soft D sound for the gotta. And that can sound American, and it does, but there's a way of distinguishing the British and the American pronunciation. With the British pronunciation, listen to the vowel, got, gotta. And then listen to the American, and my American is not very good, but if you listen to the American vowel, ga, gotta. So we can compare the vowel sounds, and the British sounds quite different, but we do have that soft D sound for the double T in gotta. We use that a lot in spoken English in Britain. Got to do something, I've got to run, I've got to study. We use it a lot. Now, I've got to means I have to. It's an obligation. Dash means go somewhere quickly. So if we put it together, got a dash, it means I have to go somewhere quickly. So think about the meaning. You can use dash a lot, but also think about the pronunciation as well. We do have the soft D in British English for the T sound, gotta, but the vowel sound sounds quite different with the O. Okay, a bit of a longer lesson today, so let's summarize. Number 1, we looked at I've got my eye on something, meaning I admire something and I want to have it. Number 2, we looked at we ought to be able to afford it. We ought to means is a modal verb meaning that it's probable. We can probably afford it. Number 3, we looked at got a dash. I've got to do something is the same as I have to, so it's an obligation. And dash means to go somewhere quickly. So those are the 3 things that we learned today. Quite a long lesson, so if you made it to the end of this video, well done. I'll be back soon with more Sherlock videos and common mistakes, so have a great day and see you soon.